Welcome to Work Life by Design. I'm your host, Mel Marsden. As a passionate entrepreneur with a desire to create places where people and business thrive, I hope to inspire you to find your place at work and in life so you can live a life by design. You'll hear stories of transformation, exploring everything from organisational psychology to brand, and identifying opportunities in your workplace and your life to inspire your human potential. So, let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of Work Life by Design. Building an organisation that is still thriving 30 years on is no small feat. In today's chat, I welcome Bruce Davidson, the Executive Director of Davidson, an organisation specialising in enhancing workplace performance through their service streams of business advisory, recruitment and technology consulting. They have continued to evolve to stay relevant in an ever-changing world. Bruce's main passion in life is assisting organisations and individuals to reach their potential. With an innovative mind, compelling attitude, and ever-constant passion for the industry, he is committed to leading Davidson to the position of one of Australia's leading workplace performance consultancies. As you'll hear in today's chat, Davidson are also passionate advocates for supporting the community. Bruce is also the Chair of Yalari, a not-for-profit organisation deeply committed to its mission to educate and empower Indigenous children from regional, rural and remote communities to bring about generational change and empowerment for ongoing success, with a vision to develop over 1,000 Indigenous leaders. Community have also had the great fortune of working with Davidson on the workplace strategy, design and delivery of their Brisbane headquarters completed in September 2020. The project has since been recognised by several industry awards for its contribution to the betterment of workplace design. We get to hear Bruce's perspective on the project and the impact that this has had on their people and their business as they emerge from a post-COVID lockdown in 2020. In today's chat, we do cover quite a bit of ground, everything from what it takes to build a sustainable business through to Bruce's own personal routines and rituals to ensure he's still loving his work life after 30 years, along with the impact that they are observing in workplaces navigating COVID in the new world. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy this chat with Bruce Davidson. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming along. I'm so glad to have you here.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here given the history we've had.
Yes, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute.
That sounds a bit suspect, doesn't it? We might need to go into that in some more detail.
we will, don't worry. So, Bruce, you have been running Davidson for 30 plus years now, and Davidson's described as a workplace performance organisation. Now, you originally started out in recruitment. How has the business evolved and changed, and how have you seen the world of recruitment change over that 30-year history?
Well, just a small correction. My brother founded the business, so and I've been in it for 25 years. I joined him when he was sort of 5 years into it. Yeah, look, it's evolved in a lot of ways, and then in other ways it's really predominantly doing much the same things, somewhat to my disappointment. Probably what's evolved is the landscape in which it operates, more so than recruitment's view of itself. It's still seeing itself in the same way it always did, find a company that needs someone employed or several, and go about taking it to market in much the same ways. We used to put it in print, but now it goes on to Seek or LinkedIn. And really that's the significant difference. The evolutions which have occurred have predominantly been more around process outsourcing than they have been anything fundamental. But over the last probably half dozen years, we're starting to see a few organisations who are thinking a little differently, as have we, which is really more about probably what most people would see as organisational consulting. It's extending the relevance of the organisation beyond the transaction of recruitment and thinking more holistically regarding where clients have needs to improve performance in their organisations.
So taking what was a core element and really then building out the whole business around it to make sure that you're attracting the right people and then retaining them because you've got the right systems and structures underpinning the business.
Yeah, and I think the challenge for the industry has been, of course, that, strategy, planning, process, systems, organisational design, operating models, all of those things have traditionally been seen to be more the sort of domain of the big four accounting firms or the significant consulting firms, whereas recruitment, because of the nature of its sort of very sales-oriented mindset, has constrained itself. And I think in some ways we've been the recipients of what we deserved in terms of that mindset. However, you can see now that there are many organisations who are starting to evolve and who have earned the trust of clients to be able to assist them with those more strategically or complex sort of areas of their business. And it's great to see, and I think it's going to provide a very, very bright future for a lot of organisations. Others are going, as I say, far more down the process efficiency routes, and that's more your recruitment process partnering, recruitment process outsourcing routes, which are great businesses, but probably not the same strategy.
Now, the business has been going for 30 years. So what is the secret to having built and then sustained a business over that period of time?
Mel, if I'm being honest, I think the number one thing I would say that you need above everything else is just resilience and determination. We weren't in any way, shape or form the smartest or the most savvy commercial operators. But what we have been is passionate about what we do, really determined to build something that we could be proud of. And, we've done it well at times, and other times we've headed down gullies that I wish we hadn't have. As I look at a poster sitting behind you, it's not a bad metaphor actually for the journey. For those of you who are on the podcast, it's a picture of some mountains, and there's clear ravines there. And we've had a few sort of routes down paths that were probably good learnings. But at the end of the day, it's quite simple. You're just not beaten until you give up. And so don't give up is my really simple answer to that.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Yep. And a lot of blood, sweat and tears that go into that, and make sure you don't keep up.
Well, I think the other thing, of course, that sits alongside that is why would one want to keep going? And I think the key to that, I think, is really being very connected to the purpose and the meaning in what you do. And if that really underpins everything you're doing, whilst you're sort of learning about how to build a business and making the mistakes along the way and feeling bad about it at times and great about it at others, every day you can connect to something that really matters, and that probably gives you the resilience to keep going.
I think that's a really important point that you make there, because I wholeheartedly agree, and that's why I spend a lot of time working with clients to help them understand that purpose, because I think that, if you really are connected to why you're doing something, when the chips are down and times are tough and you're kind of sitting in a ball in the corner rocking, you can kind of connect back into that, and it gives you that strength to get back up again and keep going, because you realise that what you're doing is something so much bigger than you, and it's far greater than you, the impact of the thing that you're doing, and it's just finding that and really tapping into it.
Yeah, and there is a hidden trap in that too, and the trap is that I think a lot of business owners or CEOs or whatever they describe themselves as hold on to that piece, and really it becomes the excuse or the blocker to them actually doing more. Because really, if you want to build a bigger business, a stronger business, a more diverse business, it does require a changing of culture from that pure mindset. So there are wonderful, generally smaller businesses that hold to that philosophy and don't embrace the sort of commerciality and the toughness, if I can be quite blunt about it, that is needed at times to take a business from, relatively small to something bigger. And of course, owners tend to believe that those things aren't aligned, that you can't, you're going to forsake somehow that core value set or that meaning to achieve the growth that comes with that commerciality, which is not true. But I think many fear that that will be the case.
And you would have seen quite a bit of that, I'd say, with the diversity of clients and the different sectors and industries that you have worked with over that 30-year period. Has there been particular challenges that you've seen more often with that growth through, or a particular transition phase, or is it very dispersed and quite different?
No, you'd be surprised. There are some themes which are really consistent. Start a business, bring some wonderful people in who come on board and who share that same philosophy, work really hard together, take something that was just an idea to something that's substantially more than that, just as you've done in your own business. But I always remember a fellow called Rod Forrester, who built a wonderful business that ultimately ended up being listed, called FKP Limited at the time. Rod, when he was stepping out of the CEO's role, said to me, "Bruce, there's never been a point of time at which we haven't taken a substantial step up where I didn't outgrow at least 50% of my leaders." And the ability to recognise that and to act on that quickly enough is probably the number one thing that I see holding businesses back and leaders back. And then very closely aligned to that is and I put myself into the same category. Unless you've been in bigger organisations and you've seen what good looks like in terms of leadership and you've had all of those exposures, very often leaders don't know what good looks like alongside them. And so they think they have good, but it's not until they see it that they know what they really needed. And then I think the other thing that I see, particularly in those businesses which are founded by a couple of people, is, and it's quite a sad thing, it's a very human thing, but very often resentments build between the founding shareholders. The things that initially made them great in terms of the yin and the yang become the source of the malcontent between them. And that too can be a really destabilising. And for very many businesses, they never get beyond where they need to go because of it. Yeah, there's probably a whole lot of themes, but they are similar, Mel. There's a commonality to the things that hold businesses back, I think.
Really interesting. Thanks for tuning in today. This season is all about designing a work life you love, but you can't achieve this if you don't know what it is that you want from your life and from your work. So to help you with this, I've created a free downloadable to get you on track. This little downloadable is my toolkit to clarifying your purpose and uncovering your values. Two things that I like to think of as setting my North Star, the place that I am heading to. You can grab this at melissamarsden.com.au/North Star. Now, let's get back to the episode. Obviously, COVID has completely shifted our landscape of work over the last 2 years. How have you seen that transition in organisations, and how are you supporting organisations to navigate that new playing field with hybrid work and all the other changes that are coming?
Yeah, look, I guess the themes of the obvious changes or the things we all need to be thinking about are really strong and well known and probably well discussed, although not well defined in terms of where it will all end up. What's been more interesting has been outside of those industries that have been so obviously impacted, and we don't need to go into them again, but the tourism and hospitality and travel industries, etc. In our client base, which albeit is fairly well defined into a range of sectors, they have had probably the strongest period of time I've ever seen. So what's been really interesting is whilst everyone's been navigating the wellness factor, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, and we've had the same thing, and a need to be very, very conscious of your teams and individuals, differing ways of dealing with that, most businesses have actually been gearing up for growth, and significantly. And so what's been coming out of it by way of themes has been a recognition that technology is not a nice to have. It's actually the enabler for strategic advantage. And so there's a massive amount of rethink going on in terms of the technology space and investment into it. And the other thing which has been really interesting is because balance sheets have been really very, very strong, in fact, the strongest they've ever been, and for a lot of medium-sized businesses, that was pump-primed by the government initiatives. We've seen that organisations are actually reinvesting, and whilst I'm sure and understandably there'll be detractors to the government stimulus, what's probably not being talked about as much is the stimulus to investment that's occurred as a result of it. So we're seeing organisations gearing up for growth. We're seeing organisations looking at how they can do things more efficiently, and not just from a cost-saving perspective, but also from a customer perspective and a strategic advantage perspective. And we're seeing a lot of redesign of organisations occurring as a result of both the technology influence and the desire to do things more efficiently and set up for growth. So it's been the busiest period of time I've seen in 25 years of doing this, and I'm not sure we will see anything quite like this again.
It's so interesting because I'm seeing different things in different sectors as well, but wholeheartedly agree with you around the technology piece. Without that, we can't function. Now, whether you're in the office, out of the office, it doesn't matter, because that mobility that you need from technology enablement and that connectivity, it is the core.
Well, and of course there's so many dimensions to technology now. It's so omnipresent and everything, but it's also data. Organisations are really genuinely starting to get their heads around what does data really mean, and more importantly than the word data, they're really beginning to understand insights and the insights that can be gained. But of course, to do that, it really comes back to very mundane things, and I won't bore us, but it really does come back to architecture. How are we actually set up to capture that data in the first place? So a lot of what we're seeing now is that organisations are really going back to the very basics of the building blocks of how they set themselves up to use data to gain insights. And then, of course, there's all the cybersecurity issues that we're seeing. And whilst many organisations have partly moved to cloud, the realisation that really we need to embrace cloud and have everything work in the cloud and interact well within the cloud is going to see all sorts of investment. And then just to complicate it or probably make it even busier, we're seeing more mergers, acquisitions, and even some divestments than we've ever seen before. So it's a really fascinating landscape, one full of opportunity. And then throw into that, of course, the fact that we aren't bringing any migrants in. And so we've got critical staff shortages. And then just to throw one more thing into the equation, we've also got lots of organisations bringing back onshore things that offshored over the previous 10 years for sovereign risk. Yeah. So it's just a fascinating period of time to be in business.
So many moving parts going on. And how has Davidson changed as a result of what we've been through over the last 2 years?
The thought that popped into my head, and I caught myself because I didn't want it to sound in any way arrogant or full of hubris, but I think we're a much better business. And what I was about to say is I think that would be true for very many businesses. Why are we a better business? I think it gave us the opportunity to look at all sorts of things that we probably planned to look at, but we addressed them quickly. We were given the license to do that by our team in the understanding that we really needed to set ourselves up for whatever it might be that was coming our way. And we probably achieved, and I think this is true, as I say, it's not a Davidson thing, I think it's true of many, many organisations I know, we achieved in the space of less than a year what would have otherwise taken years and may not have even occurred for fear of the change factor and what that might have meant for many. Tangibly, what does that mean? We reorganised ourselves from 6 divisions down to 3. We redefined our go-to-market for clients to be far simpler. We effectively rebranded some of our businesses that weren't under the Davidson banner. And we've also invested in things like technology ourselves and continue to do so. So we've emerged from this a far better, simpler and more efficient organisation. And those things all sound relatively simple, but of course anyone who's involved in doing those things in any organisation of any size knows they're very complex. There's huge amounts of work associated with them. And having achieved many of those things, we now have the benefit of being able to be very, very client-centric. And so we're thinking about now account management and key account management. We're thinking about better use of data and insights ourselves. And we're sort of getting to those really big difference makers now. And it's a simpler, easier business in that sense, although there no doubt be a million and one other things that come up.
I think interesting that you point that out, because I think that COVID gave us so much permission to do things differently, to change the way we do things. But as the individuals within organisations, I think we also had to change really quickly. And then now change has kind of become part of our expectation around, what's the next step that our organisation is going to need to do, and having that change mindset to be able to really just sort of roll with it and get on board with it. Is that what you found with your employees?
Yeah, I'm thinking as you're speaking there, Mel, because I think we've got a really interesting part that we need to all be very mindful of, and that is that we've had people who've gone through an incredibly stressful period of time. And perhaps here in Brisbane, where you and I are right now, we might be somewhat shielded from it. But I think if you're in Sydney and Melbourne, where so much of the country's sort of engine room is driven from, I think we've got to be very cautious not to continue the rate of change that we've had for a period of time and give our people the chance just to normalise is probably the word, and to know that it's not going to be this sort of endless slew of change. But in amongst all that, the reality is that organisations to thrive and prosper are going to have to continue evolving and fairly rapidly. So it's a bit of a balancing act coming up for us.
Yeah, there's a lot of fatigue that we're all experiencing, and we're very much shielded from it here in Queensland, as you said, but it'll be interesting to see how that does start to transition for those states now that they're opening up and getting some of their freedoms back.
Well, I think the really interesting things that comes out of it is what do you do about that? And I think there's 2 themes above all others that come out now, and that is that empathetic leadership, not just the moniker or the tag or the nice idea, but the reality of that, true empathy in leaders is going to be paramount for any organisation. If they don't have it, I suspect they're in for a really hard time. And then the second theme, I think, is that our people need to be listened to so that we can actually understand exactly where they're at. And aligned to that, I think, is that theme that I know you're very passionate about. They have to be connected to something we're doing that matters to them. Yeah. So if you've got the empathetic leadership and that connection to purpose for your team, plus the listening, I think that's probably the formula we all need to be thinking about most.
And that's a great segue into my next question for you. I know that Davidson have a very strongly articulated set of foundations across your business, from your purpose to your values to your social commitment pillars. It's all a very, very strong vision that you have laid there. I know this is also something that you do for other organisations, but how has this enabled you to lay those foundations in your business to become very strategically aligned with your workforce? And how has that driven growth and performance in your own business?
You're probably not expecting the answer you're going to get. But I think the reality is that for a lot of employees, and I don't say this in a judgmental fashion, I've got to be careful how I articulate this. Employees are driven by the idea that they want to belong to an organisation for whom corporate social responsibility is a reality. Reality for the individuals, however, is that they are, parents, be it single or with partners. They have really busy lives. They are under pressure, whether it is by design or otherwise, to achieve. And there's only so many hours in the day and only so much of one person that can be given. And so what I notice is that many individuals within an organisation want to give and want to be involved in the giving, but they genuinely don't have time or can't find the space for it to become a true priority. And so I think for them, they want to know that by doing what I do for the organisation and the organisation being strong, something flows somewhere, even if I can't personally be involved and I can't touch and feel it myself. But what that does mean is you'd be surprised at how few people within an organisation can genuinely find the time, space or commitment to do it. And so what you've got to be artful in doing is finding those individuals within the organisation and also being very realistic about the amount that an organisation can do. So we've really shrunk our focus down to a few definable, measurable, achievable things, but things which our team told us mattered to them. We do a lot of work, as you know, on the First Nations pillar, and we do a lot of work in gender. So we've sort of really tried to hone in on those as our key areas of focus. And really we try and work on what we call friendship plans. Find organisations and individuals within those organisations in those domains, become friends in a genuine sense and focus on friendship first. And then just trust that through that friendship, you'll find good things to do together. So that's sort of how we're approaching it. We're not a huge organisation. We don't have the resources of much bigger companies. And, there's always that sense you're never doing enough. But I think if you keep doing it a year in, year out, and the years add up, over time you make an impact.
And I like the way that you described that too, though, because I think a lot of us genuinely have an interest in giving back and being able to support, but we don't have the time and we don't have the capability and we don't have the resources. But if we know that the organisation that we're working for has that intention and has that alignment and has that goodwill gesture, we're actually contributing that by showing up and doing our day job every day, and we're making an impact inadvertently.
That's right, and it's very real. I think if the organisation runs it the same way they would any other program of work and really commits to it, it might sound a bit judgmental, and if it does, I sort of apologise. I probably don't really, but I think there's a lot of organisations who do this to tick the box. And when it becomes that way and it really isn't being driven with that genuine heart and soul, I think it's very obvious to everyone. And look, it's better than doing nothing. Absolutely. And that's why I probably say I sort of apologise, because the reality is that if an organisation's doing something and some dollars are flowing or some support has been given or awareness raised, then that's a tick. But where it becomes a big tick for your team is when they know it's real. That's the threshold I think we should all try and cross over. And the other thing I think, of course, associated with that is do less in terms of numbers of things, but just make the things you do count is probably the advice.
Never before have we collectively experienced such change on a global scale. The pandemic, whilst on one hand has challenged us in ways that previously we could have only imagined, on the other, it has opened the doors to incredible opportunity. The opportunity to redesign our work lives in a way that works for us. An opportunity to disrupt, reset, and recreate our new normal. And to help you on this journey, I am so excited to bring to you the Work-Life Lounge. This is your VIP pass to accessing some of the greatest thought leaders in our world of work. So often we are told what we need to do and why we need to do it, but we are often left wondering, but how? How do I make the changes that I need to? And that's where the Work-Life Lounge is here to support you, to guide you step by step through the how, to take back control and design your work life on your own terms. And for the next 3 months, you can have an Access All Areas VIP pass to the lounge, thank you to the sponsorship of Community. Committed to their purpose of fostering the creation of communities where people feel connected, Community is on a mission to ensure that we all emerge stronger together, that we consciously create our work lives on purpose as we head into 2022. Now, there are only 100 seats available under this incredible sponsorship, so to claim your seat in the lounge, head over to melissamarsden.com.au/work-life lounge for more details and to register to join us for our very first masterclass on November 11 at 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time, Sydney time. I can't wait to see you in the lounge. Now, let's get back to the episode. How would you recommend or suggest different organisations could consider how that aligns with their purpose, and why is the purpose and finding that purpose within the organisation really that foundational pillar to making sure that all of this stuff sort of flows naturally together?
Well, I think there's probably a few different ways you can look at that. You can align, purpose, and if you were doing that, you'd look to capability. What's our organisation's key capability, and how can we apply that to actually have an impact? Or alternatively, you can treat it as something entirely different and simply say, what are the areas that we as a group here, and it's a democracy at the end of the day and within this type of thinking, but what's our consensus as to things we'd like to be involved with? Is it domestic violence, or is it supporting breast cancer or veterans or whatever it might be, and just settle on something that if you all achieved an outcome in that space would really be something that mattered. And then I think it's not so much about capability. I think then it's about, have we got the time and the inclination to put time into helping achieve some things? And the way I describe it is probably a weird way of doing it, but I think it's a bit like signing up to the old boys or the alumni or the old girls or whatever it might be. You're there to serve the organisation that you're supporting. And rather than sort of only being limited by your capabilities, it's then a question of getting alongside and saying, what do you need done? And rolling up your sleeves and helping get it done.
Yeah, just helping facilitate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Community had the good fortune of working with Davidson to help you strategise, design and build your new workplace environment. What are some of the unexpected outcomes that you've witnessed as a result of the completed workplace environment? Now, just to give everyone a bit of context here, we actually completed the builds in the middle of the Queensland lockdown in 2020, and it was a relocation from everyone coming from their home back into the workplace. We designed it pre-COVID. No one had anticipated that COVID was coming. How has the workplace been able to adapt to what you need, and what unexpected outcomes have you witnessed as a result?
I think, unexpected things. Well, the first thing is a great relationship with you and your company, and you find yourself, just because you want to be, becoming an advocate. And that was a really lovely thing to have come out of this. The greatest compliment I can give you is that we wouldn't have changed a single thing despite the fact that that design was done pre-COVID. What we were seeking to do was create collaborative spaces, seeking to create greater connection between our people, more visibility of each other all the time. And in our last facility, as you know, we had a wonderful sort of kitchen / entertaining area, if you like, that was really hardly ever used in any way, shape or form. But just the way you've designed things now, people have lunch because they want to sit in there and connect. We've got a library there where I find people literally lying down and making a phone call at the time as they might at home with a friend, and yet they're talking to, a very well no doubt trusted or known client. The yarning circle, which you put in place for us, has become a metaphor. We're actually going to sit down and have a chat where anyone can say anything, and we use it in the way it was probably designed. And we've had some Indigenous staff members talk to us about yarning circles and the history and what have you. It's probably the simplest thing I could say for you is it's the sort of space that makes you want to come to work. And whilst we still, as so many organisations do, have people who are choosing to come or not to come depending on their needs, I'm perfectly sure we've got a whole lot more people coming into our space because of the nature of the way you designed it than we would have done, in almost anything else we could have done. So what surprised me, simply, I think how well it's worked, and just how well conceived it was, despite COVID, or without even COVID's sort of need, and probably that's the underlying theme to take out of this. I think COVID has become so dominant in our thinking, so ever present in every bit of media that we're reading, etc. We think everything is related to COVID, but you know what? The fact you designed this the way you did and we're having the conversations you were having with us pre-COVID tells me that this was the way we were heading anyway. And just as I said, we accelerated a whole lot of things. All this has probably done is accelerate design in my mind.
It's very true. I would happen to agree with that, because I think the clients that we'd had the fortune of working with pre-COVID were so well prepared for what had come, because it was the next logical step. So it has brought a lot of that stuff forward. But yes, we have absolutely loved working with you guys and the relationship that has formed post that project. And I think a lot of that sits on that mutual value alignment and understanding, and that shared sense of purpose, and creating really great workplace environments for people. And, you know, to the workplace as well, I think there's a lot of credit that goes to you guys, because there were some tough conversations that we were having in that design phase as well. And you had to hand over so much trust to ensure that we got to that place, because I was challenging a lot of those, those preconceived notions around what does our workplace look like? What does it need to do? How is it going to perform to get you guys to that point?
Well, all I can say, and it's not an advertorial, this is, honestly what I think. Thank God we did listen, and thank God you pushed us, because I think to have done too much less than what you wanted us to achieve, and we might have, I can't recall every discussion, we probably in some ways came up short on what your vision was if we changed things too much. But you were right in terms of the things you pushed us on and the things that you encouraged us to have the faith to do. Yeah, and if we were running the whole process over again, knowing what I know now, I would have just said, just do it. Really. And I would have, because everything you designed and everything you said would do what it did has done it.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. It's always good to know that what you suggest actually works, because heaven forbid it actually doesn't.
Yeah. Well, it does. And the other thing I think was that, which was really appreciated, as you can imagine, you know this, I'm only really talking to anyone who's listening to this now, but we were doing this at the time when we didn't really know what COVID was going to mean from a business perspective. So, we were being, very, very conscious of what we spent and how we did things, and the amount of work you were able to do to redesign and get a really cost-efficient outcome and achieve that we got is really quite mind-blowing.
Yeah. It was good fun doing that. Yeah. We created a great outcome. She says through gritted teeth. Now, the other thing I would say, though, as a designer and strategist working with Davidson, you had a great platform for us to work from. So as a workplace strategist, we spend a lot of time really understanding what is important to the organisation, what are your values, what is that foundation? Because when we can really understand that, that's what we can leverage from. That's where the real magic happens in a workplace, because we're just bringing to life all of those intangible things. And so the fact that Davidson had such a strong foundation in knowing its purpose, in knowing its vision, in knowing the values and those strong community social pillars, you gave us so much to work with in order to create that environment. So it is really just a reflection of how your business operates and who you are as an organisation.
Well, it's very kind of you to say so, but what I'm thinking while you're saying that is, even if all of what you very generously said was true, the challenge for you is a really interesting one, because we don't know how that translates. We don't know what it is you do. And I think for someone who doesn't come from your world, the concepts that we're talking about, values and purpose and meaning, understanding the translation into physical environment is a really difficult thing for a client.
Yes.
And to truly believe that someone can translate that is it's almost just a lack of complete understanding as to how that can be. But now, having lived it and seeing what that's meant in terms of what you've been able to do, I think your challenge, Mel, is going to be how do you articulate that in ways that, the sort of uninformed like myself can relate to it. Yeah. And truly understand what you do. And I suppose that's just by showing people at the end of the day.
Yeah, I need case studies like yours to take them on tours, because it's very difficult to articulate something that's such it's an essence of something, and it's a feeling. It's not something that's you can touch.
Yeah, it's how are you going to make tangible those things, and yet you have.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting process.
Oh, I'm so glad that it's all worked out for you. Now, this whole season is around designing a work life that you love. And I'd love to ask a few more questions that are a bit more centred around yourself personally, but how have you personally gone about creating a work life that you love and, still love 25 years on having been running the business with Davidson?
Well, when someone asks you a question like that, the first thing, I would say is nothing is perfect. And in this, work-life balance or going for the, designing the perfect life, I just encourage everyone to understand it's never going to be that way. Maybe it is for some lucky small percentage of people. And I get worried about those concepts because I think they're so oversold by, whatever forms of media or, the latest gurus of the world, all of which is well meant. but it's a bit like, the impact social media can have on young kids. We get sold it too. But that said, doing what I've done now for 25 years, and probably before that too in some senses, I've basically walked into rooms or coffee shops or even on weekends and football fields and whatever, and people are sharing really their lives at the end of the day. If your purpose is really about it, helping others, that's really the conversations you end up having, and you start to see themes. One of the themes I began noticing very early on, 20 odd years ago, was that there were a whole lot of people who got to their sort of, I don't know, pick a number, late 40s, 50s, whatever it might be, who were in this desperate rush to give back because they'd been paying off mortgages and sending kids to school and working hard and committed to their careers, and this overriding sense of, I need to do something to give back seemed to exist. So at the time I was very fortunate to get introduced to a coach who I shared this with, and he also happened to be an ex-Buddhist priest. He said something that I thought had come from his Buddhist background, which was, simply when I said I want to give back but I don't know what to give back to, he said, just open up. Just have the radar up for things that you think you can make a difference to. And he also really encouraged me to get very focused on things that I thought maybe weren't achievable. But if I wanted them, be really clear on what those things were. And they're pretty simple things. Mm. And then we were very lucky at the same time, or not too far down the track, to have a chairman who, a very wise guy, that sounds like he's an Italian mobster, doesn't it? A very wise gentleman who had thought very deeply about life. And he shared with me that he had these pillars that he lived his life in. And so I guess the combination of those two influences particularly led me to actually do a lot of work on what it was I wanted. And really wanted to be able to look back on and say this was actually what life was about. Now, I'm sure if a lot of people read those things, they'd say, well, it's pretty simple and it's not that grandiose or what have you, and maybe not that impressive, but it doesn't matter in any sense other than to yourself. Mm-hmm. And so over time I defined those things very, very clearly, and literally every day I sit down and I look at those things, and some of those things, to be quite frank, were so unachievable in my mind, it was scary. Or maybe if not scary, it was almost like, am I really kidding myself here? And then the simple formula was, if you wanted those things to be true, a third great influence came into my life, a fellow called Waverley Stanley, who started Yalari that I chair, and Yalari's an Indigenous education business. And Wave said to me once a saying that he lived by, and that was, if it's important, I'll find a way, and if it's not, I'll find an excuse. And so that combination of influences became a really clear set of things I wanted to achieve, a really clear set of pillars in which I, characterised my life and started to work towards, and then a really simple statement at the end of each day when I looked at those things: if it was important, would I find a way, or if not, would I find an excuse? And so that's the sort of formula I work to, and it sounds like it's very disciplined and what have you, but it's actually not. It's actually about priorities, and this is where I think people make the mistake. They look for motivation, or they look for some magic passion to emerge that's going to drive them forth. And the reality is, it's about priorities. Is achieving whatever it is you've said you're going to achieve a genuine priority? And if it is, then just do something that day to achieve it. Over 20 odd years, things start to shape up.
Takes more steps.
Yeah. And I'd also hasten to add, exactly as I said earlier, that there are plenty of bad days, weeks, months, quarters, and sometimes even years in amongst that. And it's just that willingness to keep going and at some point, realign to that and get back on that pathway and work away at it.
Yeah. And I'm presuming it took you a while to figure out what it was that you really wanted, because I think that's such a big question for many of us. But then once you had that set, you then had your intention for where you were going. So you had that sense of direction.
I think the hardest thing is we don't trust ourselves. And so we keep questioning, is that it? Is that really what I want? And we keep revisiting it. Our ability to connect with ourselves is really at the heart of why that's a challenge. And I think that's a brilliant exercise, albeit very difficult to do. And you've got to have some trusted, confidants to share those things with and explore them with and be challenged along the way. But what I would say is that the things you want are really simple generally. And I do a lot of work with a lot of people now on helping them define that. And I'm constantly delighted, I suppose, and also it reaffirms the surprise I have that the things we want are really quite simple in most instances. Occasionally you come across someone who's got some incredibly specific and incredibly, huge goal that they're genuinely going to go and achieve, but most of us want pretty simple things. And then I think along the way, it's probably like so many things we've heard or read over the years, what does tend to happen is once people start to achieve, they realise they're capable of a lot more. And so those goals and those things that they might want to achieve start to grow. And that's a really fun pathway to be on with someone.
Yeah, isn't it interesting to see that growth mindset that comes out as a result? It's like, oh, actually, I can do that. Oh, well, I'm going to go for a bit harder and I'm going to do something a bit bigger and get excited.
Well, belief and skills build
Yes.
alongside each other. And also, I guess, sport's such a wonderful thing to look at for so many obvious reasons. But, it's just that case of, the athlete does some things every day for, a year or two or three and becomes highly skilled at that. And it's no different in life or business. Another great mentor of mine, different to the first three I've mentioned, once said to me something so simple, and he said, "You do understand that business is just a mind game, don't you?"
Yes.
and he was right. It is how you set your mindset. And then if alongside that mindset is a disciplined, purposeful action, and then some skills being developed in how to link plans to strategy, which is, I think, again, where most businesses fail to get beyond the threshold of, small or even medium-sized, is because we don't really understand strategy. And then if we do, we certainly don't understand how to link the plans to it. And that's the number one skill set. When you start to see that happening in someone's life or in someone's business, then the lights go on as to how to do that. That's when, you see some quite interesting and really fun things happen.
Yeah. And you mentioned there that with the repetition, like of a sports person or an athlete, they do the same thing over and over again. They build that capability. Have you got any routines or rituals that you use in your daily life and life in general to build your own performance and build that within what you do?
I don't like talking about it, to be honest. But the reality is I get up somewhere between 3 and 4 each day. I read the paper, feed the dog, have a cup of coffee, I shower, shave, change, and go for some sort of exercise. Might be an hour and a half run, might be weights, whatever it is. Come back, get changed, go to work with my son. Sit down in a coffee shop pretty well every morning, unless there's something, that I have to be at early. I pull out those things that, if I haven't already looked at them at 4 in the morning, those daily focuses, and I simply ask the question, what do I need to do today, and how am I tracking against those things? And people look from the outside and they say, gee, you're disciplined. But the reality is I'm probably one of the most undisciplined people I know, and I really mean that. And people sort of laugh when I say that now because, who can say that gets up every day and trains like that and does those things? But it's nothing to do with discipline. It's just that statement. If it's important, I'll find a way. If it isn't, I'll find an excuse. And one of the really simple things I wanted when I really did the work on what it was I wanted was I actually wanted to be fit and healthy. And I wanted to have the chance, God willing, and health and all of those things, that if I was lucky enough, I wanted to be able to go hiking with my wife when I was 80 years old. And to do that, I actually need to do fitness and keep this ageing body moving. And so that's where it comes from. It's not discipline.
An intrinsic motivation.
Priorities linked to what you really want. When you know what you really want, as much as one can ever say that, it just is a feeling more than a cerebral exercise. You sort of know what's true. And once you begin to trust that and have a few things that add up along the way to say, hey, maybe I can, then, it just sort of is a perpetuating cycle. The other thing I'd say is the happiest people I know continue to work and be engaged with people. So, I think redefining and learning. What am I learning? How am I growing? How am I interacting? How am I making a difference to others? They're the things I think that keep you well, happy, connected and vibrant.
That constant reflection back on, is this still right for me, and am I doing it in the right way?
Yeah. Am I doing it for the right reasons? All of those things. Yeah. And as I said right at the beginning of this, nothing's perfect. Nothing's, Pollyanna. It has its messy, bad days and things you get wrong and things you wish you didn't do or say, and all of those things that go with it. But overall, if, you can get it more right than not, that's probably as much as we can ask for.
Yeah, that's right. Life is hard, and the sooner we accept that life is hard, it'll actually be a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Look, it has been an absolute pleasure to have this chat with you today, Bruce. And I've got one final question for you. It's, what tip would you give anyone about how they could design a work life that they love? Now, you've put some caveats around different things, but if there's one thing that someone could focus on to start to move that needle in the right direction for themselves, what would you say that would be?
It is that setting out what you really want and do work on that. But it can't just be the one thing. The other thing you've got to put alongside it is that statement. If it's important, will I find a way? Because if it's not, I'll find an excuse, because a million excuses will arise as to why it can't be done, or why it's not right for you, or why someone didn't give you the opportunity you needed, or did the wrong thing by you, or whatever, all of those things. So those two things together, define what you want, work out whether it's truly a priority, and accept if it is, you just got to keep going till you get it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Bruce.
Thank you, Mel.
Really enjoyed it. It's been a great
too.
conversation.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And I will put some contact details for Davidson in the show notes for anyone who would like to get in touch and chat with you more. Thanks so much. Thank you for joining me for Work Life by Design. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love you to rate, review, or subscribe, or all three, in iTunes and share it with your friends so we can continue to build this community. I would love to hear from you. If you have any thoughts, questions, or suggestions, you can connect with me on Instagram @Melmar or send me an email at melissa@melissamarsden.com.au. I hope this episode has given you a few sparks of inspiration so you can design a work life you love.